When it comes to big names in Hollywood, Sylvester Stallone and Quentin Tarantino are both up there, and you'd think they'd both be ecstatic for an opportunity to work together, right? Maybe, but that doesn't mean that just any project will do, because there sure have been opportunities for Stallone to appear in a Tarantino original. So, what went wrong? Here's the real reason Sylvester Stallone rejected roles from Quentin Tarantino twice. Even though the Rocky star had a bit of a rough start both in his life and his acting career, he's now one of the biggest and most celebrated names in the industry, and it's hard to disconnect his name and his face from his most famous roles, that of both Rocky Balboa and John Rambo. Stallone's first big break actually came from his work on Rocky, which came out way back in 1976, which was followed by the legendary role of Rambo in 1982's First Blood. Quentin Tarantino, on his turn, has absolutely become not just one of the most popular filmmakers in the industry, but he's also a bit of a controversial one. Still, many actors are just dying for an opportunity to work with the director, especially since Tarantino made it abundantly clear that he intends to stop after his 10th big movie. Whether this has always been his intention or not, Tarantino has always been extremely careful about what projects he chooses to move forward with, and who he casts to portray the characters that he has so carefully crafted. Tarantino has been working hard at his controversial career ever since his first big movie, 1992's Reservoir Dogs. But it wouldn't be until 2 years later that he would gain the recognition that he so obviously deserves. But the release of 1994's Pulp Fiction officially established Tarantino as the raw talent he truly is. Both movies are clearly about crime, but Pulp Fiction set itself apart with its intriguing, non-linear style and even more fascinating character. As I said, Pulp Fiction was Tarantino's official big break, and you wouldn't believe the kind of doors that have eagerly been opened for him ever since. But as any loyal Tarantino fan will know, the fame never took away from Tarantino's meticulous vision for his projects, and there have always been very high expectations around anything that the filmmaker decides to move forward with. Just like many other established directors, Tarantino has also assembled a few of his own favorite recurring collaborators to work with, the best examples of which are Uma Thurman and Samuel L. Jackson. But even though it would be an absolute dream for most actors to get the honor of working with one of the most celebrated filmmakers in Hollywood, not everyone thinks that just any role will do, and one of those actors is Sylvester Stallone. Stallone didn't just reject Tarantino once, but twice. I wonder what Tarantino thought about that. To be rejected once must have been confusing, but twice by the same actor? You'd almost call it blasphemy. Who in his right mind would deny Quentin Tarantino? Well, Sylvester Stallone. By the time that Stallone came into Tarantino's line of vision, or anyone else's for that matter, given the fact that Stallone really had to fight for his career in the beginning, Stallone didn't need the hype that surrounds the one and only Tarantino. In other words, Stallone was doing just fine without the help of someone like Tarantino. Ever since his well-deserved break with Rock, Stallone has been appearing mostly as a character who looks very tough, and usually his roles involve a lot of action as well. So you'd think that a project that has Tarantino's name attached to it would sound very attractive to someone like Stallone, even if he didn't necessarily need a leg up from Tarantino. Surely, Stallone's career could have benefited from a Tarantino movie or two. And trust me, it's not like Tarantino didn't try to get Stallone on board of his projects. In fact, the filmmaker asked Stallone to work on 2 of his movies, Jackie Brown and Death Proof. So what went wrong and why? In case you didn't notice, Jackie Brown and Death Proof stand on opposite sides of the spectrum when it comes to whether they're any good. One of them is widely considered to be one of Tarantino's best movies, while the other, well, not so much. Jackie Brown follows its titular character, a flight attendant who is caught smuggling gun money. This forces her to choose between teaming up with the police in order to bust her dealer boss, or say nothing and go to jail. Stallone had been offered the role of Louis Gara, the small-time crook and ex-convict, but he wasn't interested in playing the part at all, though he never really revealed what his reasoning for the refusal was. The role ended up going to Robert De Niro instead. Years later, Tarantino decided to give it another go and approached Stallone with another much bigger role. This time, Tarantino asked Stallone if he would be interested in playing Stuntman Mike in Death Proof, which was his half of the Grindhouse project with Robert Rodriguez. Death Proof is about Stuntman Mike, who murders young women with his modified car, which he claims to be death-proof. Except there's just a small catch. That rule only applies to him. It's a typical Tarantino movie, and it must have sounded at least interesting to Stallone, but he had absolutely zero interest in the role whatsoever. In fact, Stallone told the filmmaker there was absolutely no way he was about to play this man called Stuntman Mike. At that point in time, Stallone was already the proud father of two beautiful daughters, and the whole premise of Death Proof is that the character's sadistic hobby is putting teenagers in his car and smashing them into a wall, which, didn't really feel right to Stallone, and I can't really blame him for that. The role ended up being filled by Kurt Russell, who did an amazing job portraying Stuntman Mike, and to be honest, I think Stallone deserves some points for integrity right there. And again, it wasn't like turning down roles in one or two Tarantino movies was going to hurt Stallone's career at this point. In the same years that the movies he turned down were released, Stallone himself appeared in movies like Copland and The Good Life. But more importantly, in the years that Death Proof was in production and being released, Stallone returned to roles that his fans were way more excited to see him in anyway. I'm talking about two of his most iconic roles, of course, Rocky Balboa and John Rambo. So does this mean we'll never get to see Tarantino and Stallone team up? Stallone did recently announce that he's probably going to retire from acting in his own projects when Tulsa King has wrapped up. And besides, he's considering focusing more on working behind the camera instead. And to that, Tarantino's promise to retire after his 10th movie. It seems like Tarantino would have come up with something really special to convince Stallone to take on a role in his final movie. Unless, of course, they could work out some kind of partnership on the other side of the camera together. I'm sure that would make for a very interesting project. But only time will tell if these two Hollywood legends will eventually find a way to work on a project together. I would definitely be interested whether Stallone is in front of or behind the camera. But now you know, that was the real reason why Stallone rejected roles from Quentin Tarantino. Not once, but twice.
All the boys call him now.
You see this guy here staring back at you?
Yeah?
That's your toughest opponent. Every time you get into the ring.
Come on, young man.
Just let me catch my breath.
Come on, no breaks. We rest at the top.
Submit it.
They're exchanging right hooks. Balboa's drilled. Here comes Nixon. Conlon is down. That is the first time in his career he's been on the canvas. You cannot.
End of the fight.